So we're just closing the second chapter of Ketubot, which is all about issues related to evidence and testimony. And we'll see that rabbis are very often lenient, and we'll just try to draw out some conclusions. We're going to begin with a case where a woman is imprisoned by non-Jews. And we've already said, by the way, that the social assumption in the time of the Mishnah is that a woman who is imprisoned is raped. That is just the core assumption of the rabbis, just based on the society that they were living in. And I think without commenting on it, we just have to take that as read. That's their understanding. And we read in the Parsha of Emor, just on Shabbat actually, that a priest isn't allowed to marry someone who's not a virgin. And the halacha actually is that if the wife of a priest is raped, he should divorce her. And this is the issue which the Mishnah is getting at. So a woman was imprisoned by goyim, by non-Jews. Al yedei mamon muteret levala. We're clearly talking about a wife of a kohen here. If it's for money, she's permitted to her husband. So this sounds like someone was taken in order to settle a debt. There's some kind of financial dispute, and she's kidnapped as part of the settlement of the financial dispute. Ve'al yedei nefashot asura. If for a capital offense, she's forbidden. The Gemara actually explains that there's another assumption in the time of the Mishnah, which is maybe a little bit kinder than the one I just articulated, which is that if non-Jews are negotiating a financial case, then they're not going to, if you like, damage their case by raping the wife of one of the parties involved. But the Mishnah goes on to say that al yedei nefashot asura, if for a capital offense, this sounds like either a woman who's kidnapped, who's imprisoned for a capital offense, or someone whose husband is imprisoned for a capital offense. And it's not quite clear from the context of the Mishnah which is which, but there seems to be an assumption that either that she's raped in prison, or that in order to get out, she needs to exchange sexual favors in order to get out. There's some kind of assumption, and that is why she's forbidden. And the Mishnah then goes on to say, a town that's been conquered by a karakom. A karakom is an Aramaic word for basically an army that's besieging a town. Kol kohanot psulot. All the priests' wives who are in it are prohibited. So we're seeing already, by the way, we're talking about wives of priests here. V'im yesh lahen edim afilu eved. And if they have witnesses, even a slave, afilu shifcha, even a maidservant, harei elu ne'emanim, these are believed, she'ein adam me'id al yedei atzmo. So we take the evidence of anybody, even someone from the lowest strata of society. And by the way, just as we've seen in the rest of this Mishnah, of this chapter, we're taking the evidence of a single witness. We're taking the evidence of a single witness to essentially protect the family of this, to protect the wife of this Kohen. But we don't take her evidence itself. Ein Adam me'id al yedei atzmo. Someone can't give evidence about themselves. And this seems pretty tough. And the Gemara comments at this point. In the name of Amar Rav Idi bar Avin, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashyan. Rav Idi said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashyan. And this, by the way, is this quote from the Gemara is brought in all the commentators. All the commentators bring this remark, but I'm just bringing it to you from the Gemara. Im yesh sham machbo achat, even if there's a single hideaway, and the Gemara is talking about a hideaway that is suitable for a single person, i.e., if a single person could have hid. Matzelet al hakohanot kulam. It saves all the women married to priests. In other words, if there's a possibility of someone hiding away, the assumption is that any of them could have hidden away, and therefore kind of they're all considered not to have been raped. That's the base assumption of the Mishnah. So again, the Mishnah seems to be bending over itself to try to preserve the family life of the people involved. But it's still going to stick to its principle that no one is believed as to himself. And by the way, that seems to include someone's wife. Amra Rabbi Zechariah ben HaKatsav. So Rabbi Zechariah ben HaKatsav said, Hama'on hazeh, by this temple, that means he's swearing an oath. And now he's talking about the time of the destruction. He's talking about the Romans moving through Jerusalem. Lo zaza yada mitoch yadi misha shenichnasu goyim liYerushalayim ad sheyatzanu. Her hand didn't move out of my hand from the time that the non-Jews entered Jerusalem until we departed. I'm sorry, the translation's not right here. Until we departed. So it feels like they fled. The Romans stayed, but they fled. Amrulo, this must have been, maybe he went to Yavne, because there's a bet din here, clearly. Amrulo, Ein Adam Me'id al Yedei Atzmo. No one can testify concerning himself. We can't accept your testimony, or actually your testimony combined with your wife's, for what happened when the soldiers were in Jerusalem. We can sometimes accept testimony from people who remember things that happened when they were children. And again, generally, we don't accept testimony from children. But the Mishnah is going to go on, and this is now the closing point of the chapter. These are believed when testifying as adults about what they saw as minors. So now we're going to have a whole list of things. And the Rambam is going to comment here. Let me find the Rambam. For Elu Ne'emanim, these are believed. And he makes a very, very astute comment here, which actually none of the other commentaries bring out. For Elu ha'inyanim kulam omnam hem inyanim sarich bahem pirsum. These issues all require publicity. Pirsum ba'alma, publicity in the world, or general publicity. Bilvad, only these issues. V'heim kulam midrabanan. They are all rabbinic. I.e., the Rambam, the Maimonides is saying, you go through this list and keep in mind these are all things which are basically publicly known, and they're all rabbinic. I.e., we're not really sticking our neck out when we accept essentially the testimony of the minor. I mean, it's a testimony of an adult, but he's testifying about what he saw as a minor. So let's have a look at the list. So a person is believed to say, this is my father's handwriting. This is on a document. This will be on a ketubah, by the way. And by the way, Maimonides is now going to say, by the way, the ketubah is rabbinic. It's not Doraita, which is really interesting. Some people try to make the ketubah out as Doraita, but clearly the Maimonides is saying it's not Doraita, it's rabbinic. So anyway, we believe a person when he says, this is my father's handwriting. This is my brother's handwriting. Zachur haiti be'eshet ish ploni sheyatzat behinuma v'rosha prua. I remember that the wife of that man went out with a hinuma and with her head uncovered. Do you remember, in terms of the evidence that a woman was married as a virgin and therefore gets a ketubah of 200 zuz when her husband dies, remember, one of the pieces of evidence was that she went out in a hinuma. Yeah, hinuma was some kind of veil that she could nod off under, or some kind of myrtle canopy. Anyway, we don't know what a hinuma is, but if she went out under a hinuma, she was a virgin, and her hair uncovered similarly. This guy used to go out from school to immerse for his truma. So he used to immerse I guess, before dark, so he could eat truma after dark. Must have been a kohen, right? This is evidence he's a kohen. We're sort of, you see, we're recapping all of the issues of testimony that we've seen in the course of this chapter. And by the way, you'll see that the issue of marriage is intertwined throughout this chapter with the issue of priesthood. It's like we're dealing with two kinds of separateness: the separateness of the priest and the separateness of a married woman, and they're intertwined. They're, if you like, mirror examples. Lots and lots of our evidence cases have come in pairs, one about a priest and one about a married woman. It's very, very interesting how the Mishnah ties these two things together. So this guy used to go out, presumably before dark, to immerse so he could eat his truma. And he used to take a share with us at the threshing floor. That means he used to show up at the threshing floor to get his truma and maser. So again, he's a priest. You wouldn't send your servant to do that unless you went with him. He's a priest. A beit pras is a place, a field that was next door to a cemetery, and it might have bits of bone plowed into it, so you wouldn't walk on it if you were kohen. And we used to go out here on Shabbat. This is the 2,000 amot limit around the town. And again, this is rabbinic, right? The Tuchum, the 2,000 amot limit is rabbinic, following the Rambam. So we take the testimony of a adult as a child, from his memory as a child about the Trum. But there's another list. Aval. We don't believe a person when he says so and so had a path in this place, i.e., when we're talking about property law. So this is suggesting that this person had title over land. We don't establish title over land with one witness, and certainly not one witness who was a child when he saw it. Yeah, we're not talking here about stuff that requires publicity and stuff that's rabbinic. This is a contractual issue. We need two witnesses. Similarly, this man had a place of standing up and eulogy in this place. Now, people used to stand and eulogize on the edge of the road on their way to the burial ground. And people would set aside places for that purpose. So again, we're talking about land ownership. And so in summary, we can sometimes be lenient on evidence. And it sounds like we're very lenient when some matters of family law come up. But when issues of property law come up, in order to establish ownership and property, we need two proper adult witnesses.